Session 9 starts. Once again, Zuko's not going to be at the session. The DM preps another sort of filler session, this time involving two warring factions and a great mountain pass that the party has to travel to. He pairs Sokka with one and Katara with the other. And, there's some fun combat and a decently engaging story involving the two clans. Yeah, at the end of the session, Aang rolls high on his deception check and convinces the two factions to work together. The party laughs it off and ends the session a little early. It's really out of character for Aang to just straight up lie like this, but it's a D&D session, so everyone just kind of lets it slide. If this was network television, however, oof, this ending would be truly egregious. So the following week, the DM calls off. He needs a break to, sort of figure out what the hell he's going to do when Zuko comes back. Aang and Zuko, however, take this free week to flesh out their backstories, and Aang fleshes out his reaction to being titled the Avatar and sort of his relationship with his father figure, Gyatso. And Zuko adds that he kind of spoke out of turn at a war meeting and inadvertently challenged his father, the Fire Lord, to Agni Kai. When it came down to it, Zuko refused to fight, and Ozai, the Fire Lord, punished Zuko by giving him the scar on his face. And the DM, who's been looking for a way to bring Zuko into the rest of the party, is reading both Aang and Zuko's backstory, and he gets it. He realizes how similar the two characters are, and he has an idea for what he wants to do the following session, and he's hoping that it'll finally bring Zuko into the rest of the group. So after getting these updated backstories from Aang and Zuko, the DM figures that this week, Session 10, is finally his moment to pair Zuko with the rest of the party. And lucky for him, Zuko is going to be here at this next session, but unfortunately Katara and Sokka will not, which is just as well for the DM, because it'll be easier to get Aang and Zuko together if they're the only ones at the session. So the DM, before session, works with Zuko to create an alter ego for the character called the Blue Spirit. This is an idea that Zuko's been toying with for a while, but the opportunity never really presented itself until now. So he works on that off away from table. The session starts with the DM explaining that Dante is not playing Zuko this week, and he's trying out a new character because Zuko's a little too tricky to evolve in this campaign. This is all really to catch Aang off guard, and Aang's okay with this. He isn't really looking forward to more intense fights with Zuko. Player versus player combat's really difficult and very time consuming and kind of annoying, and it kind of builds resentment between two people, so it's very difficult to do well. So Aang's totally cool with Dante just playing a new character from now on. The DM explains that Sokka and Katara have fallen ill with some sort of sickness or cold or something, and that Aang needs to go get them medicine. It's flimsy, and both Aang and the DM know this, but they're here to have fun, so the narrative doesn't really matter that much. They both know that Aang needs to be alone for whatever's going to happen during this session. So again, necessary metagaming aspect of D&D kind of comes into play here. There's some rolls made, and after a needlessly convoluted series of events, Aang gets captured, and Aang is brought finally face-to-face with Zhao, which, up to this point, Aang hasn't met Zhao individually yet. They kind of met earlier, but Aang was in the Avatar state then, so it doesn't really count. Anyways, Zuko's in the same area, and he's passing all of his stealth checks with flying colors. He hasn't rolled below a 15 all night. And finally, he shows up to where Aang is. And at this point, Aang doesn't know that the Blue Spirit is Zuko, but all the same, he's sort of hesitant to trust this new masked creature. Aang, however, is not doing near as good on his stealth checks, and eventually the two get found out. And the two fight soldier after soldier, and after a good long fight, Aang is entirely out of spell slots. They're only about level 6 at this point, and Zuko, who can only tap into his resources as a fighter, has been tapped for a long time. Remember, Zuko's been multi-classing sorcerer and fighter since Session 3, really. And his second wind left a long time ago, and you can forget about any action surges, so Aang hatches a plan to kind of get them out of this sticky situation. So Zuko and Aang start making some acrobatic checks, some athletics checks, but for the final checks, both of them fail. And as they're about to be captured, Zuko kind of just says fuck it, and he just puts the sword to Aang's throat, and Zhao, kind of just lets him go. And unbeknownst to Aang and Zuko, Zhao orders his crack shot archers to fire on Zuko. And after all the fighting that they had just been through, it does not take very much to knock Zuko unconscious. At this point, his identity is revealed to Aang, and Aang's freaking out and he's stunned, but he knows that he needs to get the hell out of there, and he's not going to let his friend's character die here, so he stabilizes Zuko, grabs him, and they get the hell out of there. And the DM wants to end the session with Aang returning to the rest of the party with Zuko as the prisoner. And he's hoping that next week, when Sokka and Katara are there, the four can really hash out their differences here and realize that they have a common enemy in Zhao and kind of finally join forces, if only for a little bit, but it'll be a lot more convenient for the DM. But unfortunately, the DM makes the bad mistake of sort of flavoring that Aang's having a hard time because his strength stat is 12. So Aang says, fuck it, I'm just going to find us a nice spot to sit for now until Zuko wakes up, and then we can deal with it then. The DM's like, oh, god damn it. So eventually Zuko does wake up, and the two talk, but they don't get anywhere. And Aang just runs away and returns to the others, and Zuko goes back to his ship. And the DM is really frustrated. It was a really great session, and everyone had a good time. But once he calls the session, he goes back to his room. He's just a little frustrated, because he was really, really, really hoping that this would be the week that he would get Zuko to join up with the others. And he's just more than a little peeved that that wasn't the case. And it's not really his fault. Again, character-wise, it all makes sense. But he just wishes that he hadn't flavored that Aang is struggling to carry Zuko, because he would have missed it entirely. So he's a little peeved, but he just takes a deep breath, and he puts his head, and he says, all right, I think I can figure something out here. I think I can figure out a way that I can still pair them up. It may not be next week or the week after that, but I think I can throw something together here. So session 11 rolls around, and it's functionally a shopping session. Katara and Sokka are there, which is good, but Zuko isn't. So without Zuko there, it's kind of hard for the DM to kind of keep the story moving and kind of push them closer to the North Pole. So he kind of throws together this little town with a fortune teller, and the party goofs around in that town for the whole session, and they have a good time, which is all that really matters. But there's no combat, and there's no new information learned or gained. It's all just kind of smaller character moments, which is totally fine, especially after the last session was kind of heavy. So we come across session 12, and the DM kind of wants to focus a little bit more on Sokka and Katara. He feels like he's kind of been neglecting them a little bit, and, they've been absent for a lot of sessions where Aang hasn't, so it's sort of been easier for him to kind of lean on Aang and kind of focus things around him, but he recognizes that this is a group game, this isn't the Aang game, so he really wants to kind of play into Katara and Sokka's backstory, but he does remind them if they want more of this sort of session, that they're going to have to make an effort to be at session more often. So the DM sort of introduces a character named Bato, which was sort of just offhandedly mentioned in Sokka and Katara's backstory. And he tells the two that their father was there recently. And as I said, almost the entire session focuses on Sokka and Katara. And Aang, who has had most of the sessions focused on him, is a little frustrated by all this. So, slightly out of character for Aang, but, definitely something that the player did more so than the character. He steals a map that leads to Sokka and Katara's father. And eventually, in-game, everyone finds out. And Sokka's really pissed off, because remember, this is a game. He was at the table when Aang took the scroll in the first place. His character wasn't there, but he was there. So he just kind of had to pretend for the past 4 hours that Aang didn't have the map, even though he knew that Aang had the map the whole time, but he just pretended like he didn't, which is a really frustrating thing to play in D&D. By the way, Zuko was also at this session, and the DM hadn't really planned for that. He thought Zuko wasn't going to be here this week, so he just kind of throws something together during downtime where he's like, you're with this tracker woman named June, and she's helping you guys. She's helping you and Iroh track the party, and Zuko's like, all right, whatever, that's fine. And eventually, this sort of tension between Aang and Sokka kind of comes to a head, and an argument breaks out that's only barely in character. And the DM is kind of sensing that he needs to save this campaign, so he has all paths converge. Zuko and June and Iroh would converge with Team Avatar for a honestly really fun fight featuring kind of this mole creature that paralyzes people with its tongue, as well as Zuko and June, who are there as well. And the party comes up with a creative way to stop the mole creature by effectively blinding it. And they reconcile their differences as well, and the party leaves, and mercifully, the campaign is not ended over one kind of bad session that no one really enjoyed. Zuko didn't have a lot of fun. Katara was kind of the middleman in this argument between Sokka and Aang, and the DM wasn't having a lot of fun because he didn't really have a great idea for this campaign, and Zuko wasn't supposed to be there, but he was there, and it kind of threw everything off. So it's kind of a weird session for everyone, and everyone mostly agrees to just kind of move on, not forget about it, because there was some new information learned here and some good character moments, but by and large, just kind of forget that this session was the way it was, and they kind of move forward into the next week, hopeful of less over-the-table arguments. Alrighty, I just want to thank everyone for stopping by and watching this video. I'm sorry that you guys had to wait as long as you did, and it's much shorter than the other two videos are, but the motivation wasn't really there to do these next 5 episodes. These are the hard from like episode 10, which is Jet, until episode 17, which is the Northern Air Temple. Those are really hard episodes for me to get through when I rewatch this series. I skip a lot of those episodes because it's the most treading water that I feel the show ever gets, until kind of early season 3, where it kind of comes back. The second they get to the North Pole, all the way through until the second episode of season 3 is great. It's some of the best television I've ever seen. But it's a little hard for me to rewatch this sort of collection of episodes, again, from Jet until the Northern Air Temple, because there are some great episodes in there, like The Storm and like The Blue Spirits, but it's kind of a difficult rewatch sometimes, so I do apologize for how long it's taken for this to come out, but hopefully Part 4 will be out pretty quickly soon hereafter, and Part 5, which is the first part of Season 2, will be out pretty soon after that as well. So we're kind of out of the weeds at this point, and we're into the really great parts of Avatar, so hopefully it'll be a little less difficult for me. But nonetheless, as always, thank you guys for watching. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Take care of yourselves.